Welcome to Scaling Up. I'm your host, Chad Kessler. One of the primary hurdles I often observe business leaders grappling with is maintaining a conducive company culture that drives the desired growth trajectory. Therefore, I brought in two people that I know quite a bit about this, Kenton and Jenn Marion, to help delve into the crucial role a company culture plays in shaping and propelling a company's overall success to scaling up.
You're listening to Scaling Up, a podcast for business leaders.
First, I'd like to introduce Jenn Marion, who has successfully scaled up her business as an EOS implementer over the last year. She also has spent a decade working for larger corporations, but has also scaled up 2 restaurants before selling the businesses. Jenn has witnessed how a culture can hurt a business, but also how, when implemented properly, a culture can help drive the growth that you would like. Jenn has only known our other guest, Kenton, for a few days, while I've known Jeff for over 25 years. Jenn is an accomplished EOS implementer, is poised to offer a fresh perspective, and ask the questions that, as somebody who shares many of Jeff's stories, would likely overlook that you, the business owner, would ask when aiming to try to drive a culture that delivers the growth you're looking for. Thank you, Jenn, for joining. Jeff, with over 30 years of experience at industries and companies like Hercules, Ashland, Brenntag, and most recently as the president of Acme Hardesty before exiting a short time ago to pursue the next chapter, has a proven track record of success. He countless times has implemented an effective culture to drive extraordinary results. Not only has he successfully led the integration of 2 $1 billion companies while at Ashland, he has also taken smaller businesses and used culture to drive changes, yielding extraordinary results. In particular, when I was thinking about this today, Jeff's remarkable ability to connect and relate to anyone is truly admirable. It's something that I view as his superpower that allows him to create a connection and connect a culture focused on winning and growing as a team. For example, Jeff recently held a black tie event for a organization that he participates in, and he was the MC. And Jeff is now at this particular place in his career, but where Jeff started is this picture. Jeff started here.
Oh my!
Can you guys see my?
I've been infiltrated.
And so, we went from black tie with, a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company giving an award to Columbia University to being a young man starting in Louisiana with a gold tooth. And I think a lot of what we talk about today is going to stem from where Jeff started to where Jeff ended up and is today, is really kind of what helped him to bring and drive the organization. So Jeff, with that, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you. Kind of help us understand how you developed your superpower, as I call it, to be able to integrate teams.
Wow, my wife's in big trouble now. There's only one way that you got that photo. So this is interesting. Yeah, I think that picture was taken in Louisiana when I was in the 9th grade, and the reason I know that is because I had a lot of hair back then, and that was right after getting my head shaved. That was a tradition down there. When the seniors got their rings, they would capture the 9th graders and shave their heads and then pop them on the head. I think you can see, if you got an open face gold tooth, you either got a lot of confidence or you're going to have a lot of troubles getting around. And so I got to thank my mom from the beginning. She was one of my parents have been my role models my whole life, and now my wife. These are people that I trust and respect. But yeah, I grew up in southern Louisiana, and it was a very integrated community where I lived, and we did a lot of things outside. It was hot, it was tough. I had a lawn mowing business at age 9, but and I've moved around a lot, lived in 9 different states, and I guess I really learned from working in some really bad places to some really great places that culture really matters. And Peter Drucker said it decades ago: culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, listen, you still got to have breakfast. You still got to have a great strategy. But I think culture can really bring good companies to the next level.
It's awesome. That's awesome. And yes, I do think that's one of the things that gives you the fortitude to have a conversation with anybody and not be able to worry about who you're talking to, whether it's the person at Freddy's Fried Chicken when we go to lunch, okay, to chairmans of the board when you're standing at New York City. So, um, you know, maybe walk me through a time where you walked into the most difficult culture situation. I've got a couple of thoughts here, but and what you did to change it to kind of get that end result and how you went about it.
Yeah, I think when I first started with Acme Hardesty, the company had been flat for many years. It's a chemical distribution company, family owned, a really great business and good people. But I remember walking into the conference room on the very first day, and I felt like people didn't like each other. I felt like people were siloed, and I remember asking the question, do you think we can grow 3.5%? And everybody's head in the room kind of went down. I was like, wow, that doesn't seem like a very, a tough goal to achieve, but nobody was there, and so as I started asking questions, there was a lot of fear of change and a lot of resistance to change, and I've often kind of followed this Tanzanian proverb, and it goes, little by little, a little becomes a lot. So let me say it again. A little becomes a lot. So it can work in so many ways. You don't have to make sweeping changes. You don't have to go in and do things that are radical, but we can make little changes together. We build up confidence with each other, and then we move forward on making what seems like a great change. And the analogy I like to use is this, and it seems kind of absurd, but I can tell someone, I said, I can help you lose 40 pounds tomorrow. Okay. It's easy. All you have to do is cut off your leg. And so people usually laugh and they say, oh, that's absurd. Nobody would do that. That's crazy. But you lose 40 pounds. Another way, you could have gastric bypass surgery or something. It might take a year. It might take 20 grand. And then you could maybe lose 40 pounds. But the best way to do it is to go from 3,000 calories a day to 2,500 calories a day, maybe exercise 3 or 4 times a week and do that for 3 or 4 years. It's a big commitment, but it's a little by little change, and that's how change sticks. And that's the same with culture. You can't just go in and say, tomorrow we're all going to be respectful. Tomorrow we're all going to be kind to one another. Tomorrow we're all going to get along. No, it's those little things that we reinforce daily that make culture such a big part of what's going on. But the change is different. And the funny thing is, when you tell the story about losing 40 pounds overnight, you often hear, that's absurd, that's crazy. But pick up the Wall Street Journal and Company X lays off 1,000 people. That's cutting off your leg. It's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to work. It's been proven time and time again. But that's what people do. Rather than say, okay, let's go fix the root cause of the problem. Why are we not growing? What's wrong with our strategy? What's wrong with our culture? And then work from there.
That's awesome. Jenny, questions for Jeff off that?
Yeah, I have, one that's coming to mind based on what you're sharing, and just wondering how you think fear impacts that, as far as, not being or feeling willing to change the culture.
Yeah, I've been thinking about fear a lot lately. I don't know why. I read a quote this morning that I can't even remember, but it was, I think that, when we let fear guide our decision-making process, we tend to make bad decisions. And it's not that we need to be arrogant or overtly confident, but when we're fear-driven, we tend to do things to avoid pain or to stay away from what we know we can do or what we know that we're good at. So I get concerned when I see fear-based decision-making, because people do tend to be afraid of change. And I think that's why the little by little approach tends to work, because it's not that hard to say, okay, well, today I'm going to take in 2,500 calories. It is fearful to say I'm going to lose 40 pounds in 2 years. That makes it hard. So to me, it's really the acceptance of, we can make small changes today and really get to being in a better place. And I mean, we'd all love to have just a quick fix or something that could change a culture or anything else. But it's a process. It's a journey. And so I think it's important to enjoy the journey and not just stay focused on the destination. So.
That's awesome.
I love that point.
Yeah. And I guess, so a lot of this is focused at, more smaller to medium sized businesses, but, when they go from 5 employees to 10 employees, they've doubled their employees. So they almost have 2 different cultures. Maybe walk us through a time where you've had 2 cultures, trying to put them together. What worked well and what maybe didn't work so well and what you kind of did to be able to drive that accountability throughout the organization.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about a time that didn't work well. We tend to learn better from our mistakes or failures than our successes. But I was involved in a multinational company, and we'd purchased another company for over $3.5 billion, and I was part of the integration team to lead integrating the two companies together. And we thought we were going to have a very democratic type approach, and we were going to go through every two in the box and look at everything. But what we realized early on that the cultures were divisively different. One was a culture of conservative, sort of Midwest ethics, if you will, and the other one was more entrepreneurial. They had done things their own way. Very few levels of decision making, accountability had been pushed down in the organization. Neither one is right, neither one is wrong, but they're different. And so if we don't recognize the differences at the beginning when they happen, what's going to happen is that you're going to have this bipolar organization that's going to take something bigger than an integration team to fix. And so I think I would say that's one where it's just been difficult and maybe was not managed perfectly. But I think what's better is that when you have a company that's growing, or even a situation where you're bringing in new people, the idea of hiring for culture first becomes very important. I can teach somebody accounting, I could teach somebody management or chemicals or whatever it is, but it's very hard to teach somebody culture. And that culture seems like a big word, but whatever your culture is. And so, for example, with the last company, we really had a culture of respect. That's the way we're going to treat everybody. How we're going to show up every day. What are we going to do every day in every interaction? And then what are we going to do to reinforce that type behavior? But it starts with if you're going through the interview process or you're trying to bring someone on and they don't fit into that culture, that's an immediate red flag for us. Because like I say, we can teach you just about anything technical or what has to be done. It's very difficult to teach someone what a culture of respect looks like because it's something that it's ingrained.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jen.
I was just gonna, in a lot of the work that I'm doing with some of these companies, it has to do with getting really clear on what those core values are. So when you're doing your work, how often are you finding clarity with the core values?
Yeah, so we partnered with a company that was originally called Partners in Leadership and became known as Culture Partners. And the idea was, what is your current culture and what do you want your culture to be? And then sort of identifying the gaps between here and there. And so it really comes down to establishing cultural beliefs around key principles. This becomes your equivalent of the 10 Commandments. And this is not just saying we're going to have integrity, we're going to be nice to you, those kind of things. It's saying, what are we going to do? If it's really important for us to improve processes, then we're going to make that part of our culture. And so every process that has, we're going to figure out a way to elevate that process and understand what that process is and see what we can do to make that process better. But then you really have to go back and say, okay, well, how do you do that? And the idea is that you have to give feedback and recognition on what's going on. So in recognition can be constructive or appreciative. And so when you give constructive feedback, it's probably in private. And then if you give appreciative feedback, it's great to share that with a whole group of people so that they know what good looks like. And so you have this sort of feedback loop that begins itself. And then you're recognizing people and let them know what's going on. So I think feedback really becomes critical in that part of sustaining the culture.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting point because some of the folks that we've worked with through the years, okay, what I've kind of learned from them is they never dress down anybody, not all the people we work for, but some of them did not dress down anybody in public. And you would kind of get frustrated with them, but you knew because there was conversations going on one-on-one where you would get some feedback, okay, but they always recognized them publicly, okay, when they did something great. And it just really is such a powerful tool to do. And it's something it's hard, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be intentional and you have to think about it. So I think that's a great example.
I think it's great to catch somebody doing something well or doing something good. It's easy to say, oh, this, you didn't do this right, you did that. But if you catch somebody doing something well and say, man, Brad, the way you showed up yesterday, was amazing. And you share that in front of a group of people, then the people understand, well, that's what good looks like. But then really tie that to your goals, whatever that may be. Because you did that, we're going to be able to achieve our gross profit target this year of X million dollars. And so once people say, okay, now I see a behavior, and I also see how that links to one of our key results, because that's important too. We've got to have, clear goals on what we want to achieve as a group. If we can pull all that together, then I think it becomes really powerful. And like you say, and in constructive feedback, I find that it becomes very damaging in a number of ways to do that publicly, or to place blame or anything else. It develops a culture of bullying, and we've worked in those cultures, and it's not really sustainable, because what will happen is you'll put people into a situation of fear, and when things become fearful, people start to make up the truth and do things that may not be good. So I really think that it comes back to, if you can catch people doing something well, and then share that so other people know what that looks like, and tie it to an end goal, it can be pretty powerful.
No, absolutely. And I think, the other thing to kind of catch people on when you're trying to take cultures, and we've had a couple of them at different points in time where we're taking 2 or 3 cultures, and everybody kind of gets hung in, where did they come from? This is the right way, right? And so one of the things I've kind of walked through is I've kind of been asked to lead teams with 3 or 4 different cultures, and Lanxess was the most obvious example, because you had really 4. You had the Chemtura piece, a piece coming in from Solvay, and the 2 Lanxess groups. And I finally just had to say to the team, I'm like, it's a way. What do we want to make our way? How do we want to go win in the marketplace? It's us now, right? Don't get, beholden to the way that you did it, because you become Kodak, okay?
Right.
Who doesn't exist anymore, and what do we want to do to go win in a market that's always changing and evolving underneath us? And that's always so critical to get through to the team, and kind of get them off, their shtick of just, this is my way, this is the way I got to do it, and look at it as a collective team effort. So as you've done that, which I know you've done a few times, how do you kind of push them through that process of change management, if you will?
Yeah, it's a great observation, Chad. It's really important when you have, it can be a small team or it can be a large integration of thousands of employees, but you really have to decide what you want your culture to be. And it doesn't necessarily work if the CEO or the division leader comes in and says, we're going to have a culture of safety, okay, whatever it's going to be, and everybody is like, well, why? Let's start with why. And there's like, well, because the most important thing we could ever do is make sure the employees go home the same way they came. Okay, I agree. That's great. That's brilliant. But is that really everybody coming up from a root cause to say, what can we, how is that really going to impact our culture and our results and how we work together? Would it be better for us all to collectively kind of put together some thoughts that might say, we're going to have a culture of protecting each other. That means we're going to be watching out for each other all the time. How is that different than safety? Well, one seems like it's been forced down. The other one is, hey, I want to work with these people. I care about these people that I work with. I respect these people that I work with. And I want to create an environment that we all are taking care of each other. Because once we do that, we're going to have the safest place you ever want to work. And then we tie, how is that safety really going to tie into what we want to achieve as an organization?
And have you seen it where the organization, or the majority of the people in the organization, are living and breathing, for example, that particular core value, how that has an overall effect and impact, not only internally, but externally with the customers?
Absolutely. And it's funny, I'll go to I'm a positive guy, but I'll go to the negative again. Think of the 20% of the people that say, that's stupid. I'm so tired of hearing Kenton talk about this or that or whatever it is. And they decide they're not going to be part of the culture, or they're not going to buy into what's going on. It becomes very evident very quickly on what's happening, what's going on, and what's unraveling there. So it almost becomes, I hate to use the term self-policing, but think about a team, a sports team, and you've got somebody that's not doing their job. It becomes pretty evident pretty quickly that that's where the gap is. That's where things are gonna fail. And so for us, it's been really, or for teams that I've seen that have been really successful, it's letting that team take the message out and not It's got to be supported by the top. I've got to be, as the CEO, you've got to be the head cheerleader for what you're trying to create, but you cannot be the team. It depends on the team that you have on the field and the people that are there, and making sure that you're understanding. Because maybe you go to one of those 20 percenters and just call them out privately and say, why don't you believe in this? Well, I worked at another company and we had some stupid thing where we were going to take care of each other and a guy got hurt really bad. Let's talk about that. Let's understand that. Share that with the team so they understand why you're not showing up right now, because it's going to be important for you to get back where we are. It's those kind of things, I think, that really let the team manage that message. And like I say, they will self-police. They will take care. I got a good friend. His name's Coach Mike Rickey. He was a Pennsylvania high school football coach, one of the winningest coaches in Pennsylvania, just retired a couple of years ago. And they have this, the two things. They talk about oneness, which I love, and he's got a whole program on that. But the other thing, it comes down to this personal accountability around, if it is to be, it's up to me. So if it is to be, it's up to me, meaning that if you need 11 people and you've only got 8 showing up, well, those 3 that aren't there, they're going to prevent the team from achieving the success that they need. So I maybe a long-winded answer to your question, but I think the idea is to get everybody there.
No, I love it. And I'll tell you a little story. I believe it's relevant, but as a kid, my mom and I were in this local triathlon, and part of the race was canoeing down the Brandywine. And I had no idea how to canoe, and she had done it before. And of course, I'm, a teenager rejecting all of my mother's, direction, coaching me on this. And we literally ended up in the trees. We were not paddling in the same direction. We were spinning in circles. But if you think about it, that is what's happening sometimes. Don't you agree with teams that, can't get aligned and moving in the same direction? And what that can do for an organization is just keep them either stagnant or, they flatline or they decline, lots. Have you seen that? Have you experienced that?
I've seen it from teams that are 1,000 to teams that are 10. And I'll tell you a story about a team of 2. So one night, my wife, love of my life, she and I decided to make pasta. And so we had a pasta machine and we start mixing the ingredients together. And I could tell that we were starting to separate in our approach. I wanted to get it done, get it through the machine. She wanted to have it here. And so you could see the communication breaking down. I wish we had filmed it because it would be a great story to look at. And so then, we're trying, she's trying to be maybe a little more polite. And then I decide I'll pour some wine. That'll help. We'll get things going. And then I'll jam it into that pasta machine the way I want it. And then so she starts moving slower because she's going to make the pasta at the speed that she wants it. And so we really were just sitting there with like 2 clumps of dough looking at each other like, we're going to have to go out to dinner. And so we finally started talking about what was going on here. And it was this, we both had different interpretations of what we thought success looked like. So once we started talking about, okay, well, maybe together we could come up with something that was better. So we ended up, we had a very successful pasta dinner. Things worked out. And but it goes to even a team of 2 people that love each other and care about each other and believe in each other, but still you can get to that situation where it's difficult. And Chad, I have to point out my friend Chad here is probably 20 plus years ago. We were living on the West Coast and he was leading a team out there, and the team had some members that just couldn't get together on things. They got the book by Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and they read the book together, and they did everything else. But at some point, it's just not going to work. And so some of the members have to be moved off the team to get the team that you want to have. And so, that's not a bad thing either. Okay, when things change, you need a new chapter sometimes. So. But I think it happens to all of us. And the key is to recognize it, to acknowledge it, to bring it out and to talk about it, and to really go through and understand what's holding us back from 1 + 1 = 3 or achieving or exceeding the goals that we have.
Yeah.
And have you seen where you've had people that don't align with the culture of the organization, and after maybe trying to coach them to improve things, they have either recognized it and moved on their own, or they've had to be, moved on? Have you ever seen that end up being a good thing for them in the end?
Yeah. So yes and yes to your questions. Okay. Sometimes they move on, and other times they have to be exited from the organization. And
Mhm.
listen, it's not a bad thing. Sometimes we just don't align with those cultures. Had a great employee, a guy that I love, really serious guy, but he wanted to be in a government thing and got opportunity with the NSA, and so it just that culture fit him a lot better than the culture that we were offering. He leaves, he's
Yeah.
happier. He leaves, we're happier, and things work out on what we want to do. So it's a great question, but I think the key just is to remember it's not a bad thing. It just means that for
Yeah.
that culture, it might not work for you. Okay, and so I think that's the important part. And we're not talking about bad people. We're just talking about misalignment with the current culture or the culture that the team wants.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and you brought up the example on the West Coast when we were out there, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
And, I mean, I use that story all the time. It was an example where, I moved over to a different division and went on to a very successful, launching point to learn to really drive and integrate teams. And I learned so much from that experience, okay, as a first time manager, having a 10 plus person team, right? With many, we went from 5 dysfunctions. And by the time we got done reading the book, we came up with 10. Okay. That was a whole different story, and stuff. And we identified a whole bunch of new ones. And, it was just a challenge,
Yeah.
and that team struggled a little bit even after, I kind of moved on to the next thing. But it helped me as a leader understand, don't get set in how to solve it. Set the guidelines. Here's the culture we want to have. Everybody agree. If we disagree, let's talk about it. If we agree, what 2 or 3 things are we going to do? It's that, one by one, I forget
And
the
just
change, little by little.
yeah, to build on that, Chad, and it helped me as the regional director as well, because I remember struggling with that particular decision making process, and I thought to myself, just go in there, Jeff. Tell them what your way is. Tell them what we're going to do. Chad's in charge. Don't listen, and that happens a lot. Okay, but that would have been even more disastrous in light of what happened. What happened was things migrated, things changed, and we came to parity with 2 different groups, 2 different teams. You got promoted, you moved back to the East Coast, I moved back to the East Coast. So all these things happened for a good reason, but it was that breakdown of the culture that forced these other changes to happen there. And so, like I say, when you see a culture change or is not where you're aligned anymore, then it's probably time to move on. And I've got 3 grown kids, and I tell them the same thing. If you're working for a company and the culture begins to be different than the culture you signed up for, and you don't like the new culture, move on. It's going to be
Yeah.
better for you, and it's going to be better for the company as they want to go in the direction they are.
Yeah. And so, that's kind of a good point because, healthy to one sort of organization is different than healthy to another. But I mean, what do you think are kind of a couple of the key staples around creating, especially on the sales and the commercial side of things, a healthy culture? Like, what are the 2 or 3 things that you kind of see as the critical pieces to kind of get that culture in place to get the extraordinary results that you want from your team?
Yeah, I think one of the first things is that it's gotta start from the top in a true belief standpoint. Meaning, there are certain companies, especially like you say from sales and marketing, that just don't want. They have a prescriptive formula on how they sell. It's either been successful for them or they think it has been successful for them, and they're going to go implement that process and not want to change. But I think that the sales world is changing all the time, and no matter what the sales environment is. And so you've really got to you've got to be looking at all the time on why is this changing, and then what can we do to adapt the culture. And when you think about it. It can be risky, but it can also be hugely successful. One of my favorite Christmas stories is the Miracle on 34th Street. And if you want to sort of recap on what's going on, they've got this Santa Claus that's working at Macy's, and all of a sudden he starts sending people to Gimbels. The competing department store, and the president of Macy's goes crazy. They have all this, and then they start seeing that everybody started taking this collaborative approach to, well, let's try to help the customer out. Okay, let's don't worry about our profitability as much as helping the customer out. Now, if you say that to the CEO or head of sales for a large company, they'll think you lost your mind probably. Okay, but it really is a way that you know. I think the importance of culture and the way that it works is misunderstood by a lot of people because it really is. It really is important when you can have people understand that, just because you say, hey, maybe this opportunity is not right for us right now, but it might be right for them. People remember that kind of stuff and they'll come back and say, well, this company here, they really cared about us. They cared about what we wanted to do, and it wasn't necessarily their bottom line. Now, you go tell that to, private equity company or something, and maybe they'll say, well, you're crazy if that's what you do. It's not. And it really is one of those ones where, my father's 84. He spent his whole 85. He spent his whole life in the chemical industry. Okay, very successful, did everything else, and he'll ask me sometimes. He'll say, Jeff, why was this successful? And I'll say, Dad, it's because of the culture. Yeah, I know the culture is culture, but why are you really successful? And I'm like, Dad, you don't understand. It's because we created a culture where we're going to do this, and we're going to take care of each other. We're going to. Yeah, but like, what's the strategy? How? Like, put culture aside. Why are you successful? I said, you can't put culture aside. You can't put culture aside. But but it does make people uncomfortable when you come in and talk about culture, because what's really good to talk about, especially from sales side, number of sales calls per week, interaction. What's the model that we have? How can we clip here? That's good. It's not, or what are you doing to create value for your customer in a way beyond what your product may offer, something like that. I just think that it's going to be evolutionary. I love that more people are talking about culture. I love this becoming more mainstream, but at the end of the day, a lot of people still want to say, okay, but yeah, just put culture over here. What are you going to do? And I agree. But if you can figure out a way to take your strategy and your tactics and tie those to your culture and tie those to your end results, then you've got a formula that's pretty good for success here.
Yeah. No, and I think putting a culture in place that, it's about that customer intimacy, right? I mean, I every time I get in an organization, they're like, how many call reports has the team issued? I don't know. I don't care. I mean, they put 100 in and there's no depth to any one of them. Then I've got 100 things of fluff, right? It's about that customer intimacy, driving that customer intimacy, getting the team so you get that 1 + 1 works, equals 3 is really kind of the key. And it's kind of hard for a lot of organizations to understand, right? So you and I have both kind of walked into different groups, and some large in German, okay, and we've tried to get some change through to kind of understand some things. But when you're trying to take your team and drive change in an organization, what are some of the kind of keys that you would kind of reference to somebody who's trying to do that themselves in the business world?
Yeah, good question. I think this idea of truly understanding why the company would buy a product from you. What really is your value proposition or your competitive advantage? And you think about it, okay? Especially in a B2B type setting. Right? These are professional purchasing people. They know what they're doing. They understand. But it can't always be dollars and cents, because sometimes a lot of times the more expensive product wins. So maybe that translates to security of supply, or understanding the customer's end use markets, or having ancillary products that are difficult to get that you might be able to pull through. You got to figure out what you do well. And so it's funny, I've been in the distribution business and I've been in the manufacturing business. When you think about it, somebody that manufactures a product, they're always going to have a cost advantage. They should have a security supply advantage. They should. But why do distributors exist then? How could they ever be successful? Because theoretically they can't. Well, the manufacturers can't be everything to everybody. So maybe there's a subset of customers that do work. And so you say, as the distributor, hey, for these B and C customers, I'm your guy. I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to prioritize you. And here's the part that gets really tough. So when the A customer comes back and says, we're in the middle of a problem, they dangle this $1 billion offer in front of you. Do you have the discipline? Do you have the culture where you're going to stick to what you said you were going to do and be the customer that has security supply for the B and the C customers? Because in the long run, that's your competitive advantage. That's the value you're going to provide. So to me, it's really understanding with your teams on what is the value you're going to provide. And when you do that, and when you lock on that strategy and you support it with your culture, then you got to live it. because we're all going to get tempted. COVID was a great example. We were in the glycerin business, and all of a sudden you could sell glycerin for whatever you wanted, move it. It was going in hand sanitizer. But you gotta stick to what got you here, and you be consistent in your culture and your strategy on how you're going to do that. So
That's awesome. So I guess kind of following up on that, a hot topic today for many business owners is work from home, in the office, or hybrid. How do you kind of view that and put that into position with how you develop a culture?
yeah, so that's a tough one. That's a tough one, and I love it. I love thinking about it, and I love talking about it because there's benefits to all three of those, say, approaches. And so I think there's a big school that thinks that people that work from home uh, are lazy, or they're doing something else, or they're multitasking. And then they're in that same camp. There's somebody that says, I've never worked harder than when I've worked at home. And then this hybrid thing was, what kind of flexibility do you need? What do you, how can we do this to maximize what's going on? I am a big proponent of what I would call ultimate flexibility. If you have an employee that can do their job 100% remote, and you're getting the quality and then you have to trust them. You have to believe in them. You have to know that you hired them for a certain reason, and that they're going to be there and they're going to do their job. Because just like that, football team we talked about with 11 people, if they're doing their job, then we're going to be able to succeed. There's other people that love the camaraderie of the office, or being around other people. They feel energized by that, and they do that. And I think it's imperative for companies to create an environment where you can have that, and you can have both. And then you've got to work within that sort of hybrid model to say what works best for the organization and for the employee, to make sure that we're maximizing the productivity of everybody that's there. So it sounds kind of like a political answer, willy-nilly, but I think it really is dependent upon the organization and the culture of the organization. Meaning, if you've built a culture of trust, if you've built a culture of respect, then somebody working remotely, that would be no different than somebody sitting in a workstation. I mean, if you think people don't waste time sitting at a workstation, then come walk around some workstations. So and I'm sure we've all multitasked working from home, but for me, it really comes down to efficiency versus effectiveness, and it's a balance. And so when I have gone into the office, I find it to be effective. I can see certain people. It's great to have this nonverbal communication that you can really appreciate and enjoy together, but it's not very efficient. Okay, traveling into the office, and I could sit in this chair and have 20 meetings in a day, back to back to back, eat my lunch while I'm sitting here talking, and be completely efficient. But it's a balance between efficiency and effectiveness, really.
Yeah. And Jen, I want to get your take in a second, but to me, it all comes down to trust, and even before COVID, having remote sales teams, it's like, well, how much are they traveling? What are they doing this day? If I trust somebody, I'm looking at the results. I'm not looking at what they're doing on a parochial basis on a day to day. And it's establishing that culture that we're all going to have each other's, kind of lane, and take care of what we need to go take care of to drive the team. And that's probably the number one thing for every team I've kind of taken over is, sometimes there's somebody that's been, allowed to kind of, I'm going to do this for the next, 4 or 5 years, and I'm going to retire, or whatever it is,
Right.
And they're not up to the same level, and it kind of creates a disproportionate amount of work amongst the team. You have to jump on those, and work from home is no different,
I
right?
agree. You bring up a great point, and maybe that's the reason why I'm so adaptive to it. Is that my last job at Ashland, I had a direct report in Brazil, a direct report in Istanbul, a direct report in Poland, and a direct report somewhere in Asia, and it was almost impossible just to have a team meeting, but it really was. It really proved to me that you're right. It's about trust. It's about respecting the different cultures, the different time zones, what's going on, and then figuring out a way to do it so that when COVID happened and everybody went home, to me, it was even easier than what I was trying to do before, because most of us were in the same time zone. So it was one of those things where it was, when you work through that kind of environment, this work from home, flexibility, hybrid, it's not, we're making it a bigger deal than it is because it's a convenient way to hide behind things if things aren't going well, or celebrate things when they are going well. So,
Yeah.
Jen, what do you think?
Jen,
Yeah.
I was going to say, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I love what you're saying. I was just going to say that, and this kind of ties in some of the things you were both saying, is that when you have an organization that builds the organization foundationally on their culture as opposed to just icing it with culture, if you are building that foundation and everyone that you're bringing on board or as part of your organization is really crystal clear on the vision for the organization, which embodies the culture, you have things in place. For example, if part of your culture is accountability, the people that you're going to have, whether they're remote or they're on site, are going to embrace and embody and internalize that accountable piece of the culture. And so, that also helps you create trust and build trust because those are the people that you're bringing into the organization or that you currently have. And so I think having a crystal clear idea for everyone in the organization of what the vision is for the company really helps negate any issues with hybrid work situations or remote. And there's lots of companies right now where their entire leadership team are fully remote. But because they've established amongst themselves this vision and made sure they're all aligned and in agreement and crystal clear on it, from a culture perspective too, they're running a well-oiled machine.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
No, and I think it's that trust factor. I mean, that's really kind of like the number one thing. You set the guard, you tell everybody where the goalposts are, you set everybody's sights on it, you trust each other to go do it, and you address the issues along the way. And, I miss going into the office. I like my office here at my house, but I get tired of being at my house. I'll be here for 2 days and have only taken the dog for a short 3-mile walk or so, right? And I'm like, I'm looking forward to lunch tomorrow. So, it's definitely nice to try to find that balance in.
Well, let's face it. I mean, there's definitely conversations that occur when you're in person that don't when you're remote.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that being remote is going to take down the organization. There are other things that will take down the organization faster than that.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I agree. And it's interesting because, working remotely for many of the last 5 years, let's say, there would be situations where I'd come into my office at 7 o'clock in the morning and wouldn't think about leaving until 7 p.m. That's not healthy. That's not sustainable. That's not good for the company. That's not good for me. That's not good for anybody. And so I think what we really need to learn is how do we incorporate the environment? How do we go outside? How do we bring in things? How do we incorporate community, exercise, things that are going to allow us to be better human beings? Because if we're better human beings, then we'll be better employees and we'll be better leaders or whatever's there. Because you're right. I don't think working from home is going to take down the company. I think bad leadership is going to take down a company. I think bad strategy is going to take down a company. I think a poor culture is going to take down a company, but not working from home.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, listen, I tell people all the time, one of the most productive workspaces I ever had was when we would go to change and go for our 5-mile run from Hercules Plaza up around the Rockford Tower and back again. And, it was, we solved quite a few supply chain problems on those runs with Mr. Coleman and myself. And we just built that camaraderie and that trust factor. And it was awesome.
I could not agree more. That was probably, when looking back on my career, one of the healthiest things. We had a group of people that would go run at lunchtime, and whether it was by yourself or with a group or however it worked, it was a way to get out, hit the environment no matter what the weather was, and just go out there and really kind of come back, and you come back with a different perspective. So that is not a bad thing.
It is not. So, Jen,
Yes, can I ask a quick? I just wanted to ask you a quick question. Have you encountered leadership where they just really don't believe that happier, healthier people make a bigger contribution to their organization?
Yes, I have. I mean, I think it's unfortunate, but it's there's you go back to the example of my dad. He's from that era that believes that you need to be in an office from at least 8 until 6 and sit there and show and demonstrate that you are physically present in what's going on. And so I think there is a genre of people that kind of continue to feel that same way. And so, and when they resist it, they create a culture that's different. And that's not a culture where I want to be, and that's that. And so, and I think a lot of people, put into that. And it's funny, there's been kind of these chameleon cultures that evolved during the pandemic where, oh my gosh, we have this great company and we're so wonderful. We can move everything remote and we're going to just have this great time. And then the results aren't great. And we got to do something. Let's force people back in the office for a couple of days a week. That's going to solve our problems. It didn't. It doesn't. And then, or worse, that we're all going to go back. That typically where you work is not going to solve the problems on how you create a lasting company with growth. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to have bad years. It's like anything else. You're going to have, you might string together a bunch, but you're going to have a bad year now and then. It happens in every single business. But that's when you really should double down on your culture and say, okay, we're not going to abandon what we did. We've seen what the results look like. We're not going to change strategic direction. So, and those are healthy companies. Those are good companies and where people want to be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah.
Great points.
No, and it's I always have a couple of favorite lines that I like, and one of them is, when you kind of get around culture and a way of doing things, somebody, a boss, he was at Lanxess, a German company. He was Italian and French, and I said accountability one day, and he's that's not accountability anymore. It's commitment and results. And I said, you got to stop using the Chemtura way, which is the company they just purchased. I thought about it for a second. I said, well, actually, that's the Hercules way, which is about 20 years before, when they ingrained in our heads that you have to have accountability within an organization. And my point to him was, it's just a way. And when I think of work from home and hybrid and all these things, and maybe it's because, coming up through field sales where you were always kind of semi-remote or at your customer site, your customer was tracking if you were there a lot versus if your boss was, who probably might be on the East Coast or someplace else when you're living on the West Coast. It's just that accountability, that trust, and making sure that, everybody understands. And so a lot of times when I've taken over teams, I get a question, well, I haven't talked to you in like 2 weeks. Do you need something? No, I'm good. But shouldn't we talk? And I was like, listen, if I'm calling you all the time, you probably have a different problem.
Right.
When you're out there doing your own thing and I could see the results that you're bringing in, and that's how you build, in my opinion, a high performance team and a culture that gets you through those things. And you have to kind of let go of some of it, but still be thoroughly engaged in how you kind of get those results. So that, but
it's interesting that I think back on the field sales days. It's probably been, I don't know, 18 or 20 years ago. I was managing distributors around the world for a company, and we had a distributor in Vietnam. And I remember I went to meet him there, and he was so excited because he had this system. Think 18 years ago, before all this ubiquitous GPS and everything, he had a system where he was tracking every sales employee that he had. So he had this like dashboard. He had all these little lights, and he could tell where people were and where they were driving around and stuff. And I was like, wow. I said, that's incredible. And I said, has it helped the results? No, but I know where everybody is. I know that they're working. I know that they're working hard. Before, I didn't know they were working. And I said, because you can see them driving, they're working. I can see that they're at a customer. You see them at a customer, but the results haven't really come. It comes back to the results. It really comes, more work doesn't make more money. Okay. More effective work does. Effective work that is supported by an effective culture makes it even more successful.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, for sure. So, well, with that, any last thoughts from either one of you before we kind of wrap things up?
I've appreciated the opportunity. I love talking about culture. Like you say, it's one of my favorite things, and it's part of a holistic package. Like you say, you got to have strategy and you've got to have execution. But I've really seen how culture can really deliver and really help out companies grow and become better and stronger and more sustainable for the future. So great opportunity, Jen and Chad. I appreciate everybody. Good questions. And other than that, picture of me with the tooth open. It's been a good time. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed
Yeah.
it. Jen, any comments from your end?
I just appreciate being included in the conversation and getting to know you better, Jeff, and hearing your expertise and perspectives on culture. It's something in our work with EOS that we're highly focused on with the organizations that we work with. And you'll hear us say open and honest a lot.
Love it.
So we definitely come from that perspective, and that ties back into all of the trust talk that we were just engaging in. So, Chad, thank you so much for bringing me on.
No, thank you for joining. And I think, EOS and Sales Acceleration have a long-standing history of working collaboratively together. And I think, we'll do a lot because that trust is really kind of the key. Any business I've ever stepped in, it's really kind of simple. You got to get a team that trusts each other. You got to get them pointed in the right direction. With salespeople in particular, the one thing I tell them is, we're going to mix up the accounts a little bit, and when you talk about comp plans, okay, car plans and accounts, those are like, talking to Social Security at an ARP meeting. Okay, you got fighting words on your hand. It's like, listen, we're going to mix this up a little bit. We're going to win together, grow together. And it's that culture piece. And I think doing that, and putting those processes in place is a lot of fun. Jen kind of goes across the horizon, and I kind of go down a vertical, and it's a pretty powerful tool. So with that, thank you all for the time today, and we will talk soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.